There's a lot of talk about how we need to get growth back into the economy and how everything depends on growth. I want to put a great big question mark about that in one sense. I want to point out the ways in which the growth of the first decade of this century in Ireland was bad growth. And by that I do not just mean the speculative housing boom that we all know about. The speculative housing boom, in a sense, highlights one aspect of the bad growth. This was the most environmentally damaging growth in any Western European society. I called it once the Ryanair model of development, because what that means is, like Mick O'Leary, you dump the damage on somebody else. You externalize all your costs. But there are some other aspects of that growth which I think are less well known. If I'd had 5 more minutes, I would have done a presentation, and it would have had one crucial chart. The chart shows the employment rate, not unemployment, the employment rate standard across the EU during the first decade of this century. Do you remember those old Lisbon targets? Every country was going to have 70% employment. Now, you may remember, during the boom, there was mass immigration. The number of jobs in the country increases enormously. The employment rate in Ireland never got to 70%. How interesting. That connects to the point that Tom was making about the commitment of this society to a low-tax economy. This country, during the boom, didn't generate jobs on a very large scale for the people who were actually living here. Why not? I think if we look at at those failures, we can see things that must not be repeated again. The first one, and the OECD amongst others have pointed this out, is the failure of activation policies. We actually had lots of money in the bank, a shortage of labour, but virtually no money being spent on what labour market economists call active labour market policies. People were just given money. Benefit levels were relatively high, certainly compared to the UK. But there was nothing done in terms of services to get people into work. What that meant was that the areas of this city which had unemployment levels during the boom of 24%, right? Black holes. Nothing was done, because it was much cheaper and much easier to solve the employment problem by simply pulling in people from anywhere else. Another way in which nothing was done was education. Rory Quinn now goes around saying, oh dear, we've got to fix the education system. Actually, Rory Quinn, 20 years ago, distributed an election leaflet in his constituency, which is also mine, saying we have the best education system in the world. Rory Quinn really needed then to wake up to the fact that we were in a national self-delusion about education. We're quite good at a few things. But of course, the bottom end of the education system, what goes on in primary schools, was never, ever tackled.
It's just 1 minute.
Third thing, and last thing, the big explanation for that not hitting 70%, not even getting near it for most of the time, is about women and about childcare facilities. Ireland, despite the massive increase in women's employment during the boom, still had some of the lowest employment rates for women with children. So we have a society in which, again, large sections of the population are prevented from actually getting into the labour market. And that depends, we all know, on social services, on services, childcare, etc., etc. And you only can have that if you're prepared to have a much higher tax economy. So my simple message is, if we're going to have growth again, please, can we not have the sort of growth of the last decade? Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.